The hum of the jet bridge echoed faintly through the cabin as 10-year-old Noah Franklin stepped onto Flight 217 with quiet wonder in his eyes. His sneakers barely made a sound on the plush carpet of the first-class cabin, but his heart thudded like a soft drumbeat in his chest. He gripped the strap of his backpack tightly. Inside were a few snacks, a book on planets, and a neatly folded boarding pass marked Seat 1A. He paused just beside the seat, reading the small engraved number plate again, even though he already knew it was right. There was a kind of magic in first class, a stillness that made him feel as if he had crossed into a world he had only seen through the crackling screen of an in-flight safety video. The seat itself looked more like a throne to him than just a chair, wide, cushioned, covered in soft beige leather that smelled faintly of newness and money. And when he sat down, Noah let out the tiniest breath of disbelief. He was here. He was flying first class, alone. Outside the window, the tarmac buzzed with motion, but inside his little sanctuary, everything was calm. At least for now. It wasn't that Noah came from luxury. Quite the opposite. His life had always been full of rules and effort and proving himself. His mother, Danielle Franklin, had built their life from grit and brilliance. A woman who moved through boardrooms like they were war zones. She had risen through the ranks of the airline industry to become CEO of Skylift International, one of the most respected names in aviation. But at home, Danielle was still just mom. She packed lunches, she signed field trip slips, and she promised her son that if he finished the school year with straight A's, she'd give him something unforgettable. This flight was that promise. Noah knew little about how hard his mom had fought to earn that CEO title. He just knew that when she looked at him, she wanted him to feel limitless. And so, after months of late-night math worksheets and silent reading logs, here he was, Seat 1A. A little boy with glasses and bright brown eyes, wearing a navy hoodie and the smallest smile he could muster. As the other first-class passengers began to board, Noah stayed quiet, trying not to draw attention. He kept his arms folded in his lap, thumbs running circles on the corner of his boarding pass, as if it were some kind of invisible shield. He could already hear his mom's voice in his mind. Shoulders back, chin up. You belong wherever your name is on that ticket, baby. He pulled out his headphones and clicked on the small screen in front of him. The screen blinked to life. A soft jazz track played as the Skylift logo shimmered. He selected his favorite movie, The Martian, because he liked thinking about problems that required more math than feelings. But before the opening credits rolled, a shadow blocked his light. A woman stood just beside his seat. Her navy heels were polished to a mirror shine, and her uniform was crisp, not a thread out of place. A name tag read, Rachel Adams, lead flight attendant. Her posture radiated authority. Her smile was thin. Sweetheart, she said in a tone that wasn't quite warm. Are you lost? Noah blinked. No, ma'am. This is my seat. Rachel tilted her head just slightly, one brow lifting. And where are your parents? I'm flying alone, Noah replied, reaching instinctively for the boarding pass nestled in the pocket in front of him. My mom booked it for me. Seat 1A. He handed it to her, and for a moment Rachel studied the ticket without a word. Then she gave a tight nod, but her lips stayed pressed together. I see. And how exactly did you get this seat? Noah hesitated. My mom works with the airline. Rachel crouched slightly so they were at eye level. Her voice softened, but her eyes remained cool. I'm sure there's been a mix-up, sweetheart. First class is reserved for our highest-tier customers. We'll find you a more suitable seat, all right? No need to make this complicated. For a second, Noah just sat there, stunned, confused. But this is my seat, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I'm not making it complicated. The eyes of a few nearby passengers turned, slowly. Most pretended not to listen. A woman with a laptop paused mid-keystroke. A businessman in a suit glanced up, then quickly looked away. The silence was growing thicker. Rachel reached down and gently tapped the screen in front of him. Come now, I'll help you find where you belong. That word, belong, landed like a brick in Noah's chest. With trembling hands, he unbuckled his seatbelt, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and stood up. The walk down the aisle felt longer than it should have. He passed rows of eyes, some curious, some blank, some burning with quiet disapproval or pity. His legs felt heavy, like he was walking underwater. and with every step, he could feel something curling inside him. A blend of shame and confusion he didn't have the words for yet. He finally reached a seat in the back of the economy cabin. Narrow, closer to the engines, farther from light. Noah slid into the chair, pulled out his phone, and began typing. They made me move. I don't know why. Up in her office, thousands of miles away, Danielle Franklin stared at her son's message. A silence fell over the room. And then, she stood. Danielle Franklin had faced boardroom battles with billion-dollar implications. She'd stood her ground in front of senators, CEOs, and the press. But nothing, hit her like the 9 words that now glowed on her phone screen. They made me move. I don't know why. The corner office where she stood was silent, save for the faint buzz of city traffic 20 stories below. Light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the surface of her desk and the silver Skylift International logo etched behind her. She read the message again, slower this time, as if there might be some alternate interpretation she'd missed. There wasn't. Her son Noah had been removed from his first-class seat, and no one had given him a reason. She didn't need to ask him if he had caused a scene. He wouldn't. She didn't need to ask if he was respectful. He always was. And she didn't need to wonder if he had the correct ticket. Danielle Franklin had booked it herself, with her login, with priority clearance. Seat 1A. Her hand, still holding the phone, curled into a fist. She moved swiftly now, tapping the screen of her tablet to summon her assistant. Andrea, I need a manifest check for Flight 217. Now. First-class seating arrangement, gate crew notes, and any in-flight flags. Also, get me on a call with Captain James Carter if he's commanding that flight. There was no hesitation in her voice, but under the surface something trembled. Not fear. Rage. She had spent decades building a name in an industry that was never made for people like her. She had fought for the right to be in rooms where no one wanted to hear her voice, and now someone had told her son, her baby, that he didn't belong. Back in the cramped economy seat, Noah sat perfectly still, his small fingers gripping the edge of the armrest as if the act of stillness might stop the roiling ache in his chest. He had sent the message. That was all he could do. Now he waited. Around him, the hum of flight preparations continued. Passengers loaded their bags into overhead bins. A toddler cried 2 rows back. A man coughed into his elbow. The world moved forward like nothing had happened. Only it had. He stared down at his shoes. He didn't want to cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. The voice of the lead flight attendant floated through the intercom with saccharine professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Skylift Flight 2117. Our estimated flight time today is 4 hours and 30 minutes. Noah's stomach turned. He'd never hated that voice until now. 30,000 feet above the city, Flight 217 rose through layers of cloud. Outside the window, the world looked peaceful, white, endless, undisturbed. Inside the cabin, the storm was just beginning. Back in first class, Rachel Adams moved with the same choreographed confidence she'd cultivated over 15 years of flying. She poured drinks, arranged meal trays, and offered napkins with her signature tight-lipped smile. But underneath that composed surface, something shifted. She'd noticed the stares, the awkward silences, the way her younger colleague, Kayla Monroe, had barely spoken to her since boarding, and that boy hadn't returned. She assumed he had settled in the back and moved on. Kids forget these things quickly, she told herself. Only Rachel hadn't forgotten, because deep down she knew. She hadn't even scanned the QR code on his boarding pass. She had just looked at the boy, black, alone, in a hoodie, and decided that something was off, that he didn't fit. Rachel didn't want to call it bias. She told herself she was protecting order, preserving standards, keeping the cabin as it should be. But something about Kayla's silence and the weight in the air made it harder to believe that. Danielle's voice came through the line like a sharp blade cloaked in velvet. Captain Carter, she said, I'm Danielle Franklin, CEO of Skylift International. There was a pause, the kind of pause that meant someone just realized who they were talking to. Yes, Miss Franklin, the captain replied evenly. How can I help? I need clarification, she said, keeping her voice cool. My son, Noah Franklin, is currently aboard your flight. He was seated in 1A with a verified ticket. He's just informed me that a flight attendant removed him from that seat. I need to know who made that call and on what authority." Captain Carter's voice tightened. "Ma'am, I wasn't informed of any seat reassignment. That should have come through a manifest update, and I received none." "I want eyes on this immediately," Danielle said. "Pull up the cabin log, speak to your attendants, find out what happened. And Captain—" "Yes. Do not let this sit unresolved while that plane is still in the air." In the cabin, the mood shifted again. Rachel received a call via her crew phone, coded and urgent. Her eyes darted to the curtain separating first class from coach. Then came the knock. Captain Carter stepped out, his posture stiff, his jaw clenched. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. But when he leaned in and asked, "Did you personally reassign a passenger from seat 1A without verifying his boarding pass?" Rachel felt every drop of blood drain from her face. She started. "I thought it was a mix-up." "You didn't check the ticket?" She shook her head slowly. He exhaled through his nose, disappointed but not surprised. "You need to walk him back. Apologize. Personally. Now." Rachel Adams stood frozen in the galley, the crew phone still warm in her hand. Captain Carter's voice had been calm, disarmingly so, but beneath that composure was the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much and had long since lost patience for excuses. "Apologize. Walk him back. Do it now." The words rang louder in her ears than the drone of the engines outside the cabin wall. She had weathered countless minor passenger disputes over the years, wrong seats, missed connections, loud complaints. But this wasn't a dispute. It wasn't even about a seat anymore. It was about a moment of choice made in seconds, now spiraling beyond her control. Rachel reached for her neck, as if adjusting her scarf could steady her nerves. Her reflection flashed briefly in the stainless steel panel of the galley door. Composed, professional, experienced. And yet the hollow ache in her chest betrayed her. She hadn't verified the boy's ticket. She hadn't asked for a second opinion. She had acted on instinct. No assumption. And now the assumption was about to cost her everything. In the dimmed lights of economy class, Noah Franklin stared quietly at the tray table folded in front of him. He hadn't touched the complimentary crackers. The flight attendant who passed by earlier had barely glanced at him. The shame still sat heavily on his shoulders, like an invisible backpack filled with bricks. It wasn't just that he'd been moved. It was how it had happened. How she had looked at him, spoken to him, as if he didn't belong. He checked his phone again. No new messages. He thought about texting his mom again, but something stopped him. He knew she was working on it. He could feel it, like a shift in the air before a storm. Then the aisle rustled. Noah looked up. Rachel Adams stood just ahead, one row away. Her posture was stiff, her lips pressed into a tight, artificial curve, a performance smile. "Noah," she asked, voice lower, quieter than before. He blinked. "I'd like to apologize. There was a misunderstanding. I should have confirmed your ticket earlier. That was my mistake." Passengers nearby had started to listen. Whispers passed like gusts of air, moving from seat to seat. Some turned their heads, others feigned distraction. But Noah could feel the collective awareness settle around him like static. "I've been asked to escort you back to your original seat," Rachel added, gesturing faintly down the aisle. Noah didn't move right away. Not out of defiance, out of disbelief. Why now? He slowly reached for his backpack, still tucked beneath the seat, and stood. As he stepped into the aisle, Rachel turned, beginning the walk back through the aircraft. It felt longer than before. The passengers she had breezed by earlier now watched her with a different gaze, some curious, some cold, some quietly judgmental. A few recognized her. A few nodded at Noah, but most remained silent. As they passed through the curtain separating the cabins, Noah didn't look around. He kept his eyes forward. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from something more complicated. They reached seat 1A. Rachel stepped aside. "This is your seat," she said, voice taut. Noah sat down gently, carefully placing his backpack on his lap. He adjusted the seatbelt slowly. His face was blank, unreadable. "If you need anything," Rachel added, Please don't hesitate to ask. He didn't answer. She lingered 1 second too long, then turned and walked back down the aisle, her steps less certain than before. Her professional mask remained, but her foundation had cracked. In the cockpit, Captain Carter stared out at the clouds, arms folded. The call from corporate had come minutes earlier, and its consequences now settled heavily over the cabin. Was she cooperative? His co-pilot Blake asked quietly. She didn't argue, Carter replied, but she didn't apologize because she understood. She did it because she was told to. He didn't have to say it out loud. That wasn't good enough. Back in her office, Danielle Franklin read the newest text. Back in seat 1A, she apologized. Kind of. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but her jaw remained tight. An apology given under pressure wasn't an apology. It was a maneuver. She picked up the phone again and dialed. Ethan, she said, when the voice on the other end answered. I want a full incident report by the time that flight lands. I want the staff reviewed, and I want Rachel Adams off the line until further notice. No exceptions. Ethan Raymond, Chief Operating Officer of Skylift, responded without hesitation. Already underway, ma'am. We've begun pulling statements. There's video. Danielle raised an eyebrow. From who? Passenger in row 2 caught the entire thing. It's already circulating online. Danielle exhaled, so now it was public. In the first-class cabin, a new kind of silence had fallen, the kind born not of peace but of tension. The businessman across the aisle from Noah leaned forward slightly, then paused. I'm sure it was just a mistake, he said, an offering, a soft attempt at dismissal. Noah turned to look at him, eyes clear. Would it have happened if I looked like you? The man opened his mouth, but no words came. Eventually, he looked down, pretending to adjust the watch on his wrist. Noah leaned back in his seat and stared out the window. He had asked the question not for an answer, but because silence was no longer enough. 37 minutes into Flight 217, turbulence hit, but not the kind that rattled trays or made passengers grip their armrests. This turbulence ran silent, threading itself through the invisible channels of internal airline systems, private Slack messages, and a quietly escalating storm on social media. A passenger in row 2, young, observant, and furious, had uploaded a 39-second clip to their TikTok account. It began with a flight attendant's voice clipped and dismissive. Come now, let's not make a scene. It ended with a boy, alone, small, and dignified, walking down the aisle clutching a backpack he hadn't even unpacked yet. The caption read, They moved this kid because they didn't think he belonged in first class. Watch to the end. Chuck flying while black, Josh Skylift fail. The video was climbing fast. In the galley, Rachel Adams felt the energy shift before anyone said a word. The silence from her colleagues was louder than criticism. She noticed Kayla Monroe, the junior flight attendant, watching her, not angrily but differently now, as if a veil had lifted. Kayla had seen 100 passengers fly alone, from all backgrounds, all ages. She'd seen wealthy kids with private chauffeurs and older passengers who needed help buckling their belts. But none had ever been moved from first class without a word of protest from the staff. Only Noah, and only because of Rachel. Kayla didn't speak it aloud. She didn't need to. Rachel could feel it in the way Kayla avoided her eyes. Up front in the cockpit, Captain James Carter received the next call. It wasn't from Danielle Franklin. It was from Ethan Raymond, Chief Operating Officer of Skylift, and the man who usually played diplomat between corporate and crew. James, Ethan's voice came through crisp and clipped. I want you to know this is official. Upon landing, flight attendant Rachel Adams is to be suspended immediately pending investigation. Corporate PR is drafting a response as we speak. Captain Carter didn't flinch. Understood. And James, Ethan added, she humiliated the CEO's son. This isn't just a mistake. It's a crisis. Back in seat 1A, Noah Franklin sat with his hands folded neatly in his lap. He hadn't touched the snack tray. He hadn't turned on the movie. He didn't want to be distracted. He wanted to remember every second of what had just happened. The way she had questioned him, the way no one else had intervened, the silence when he stood. He thought about what his mom always said. You don't have to shout to change a room, but you do have to stand. And right now, the entire room, the entire plane had changed. Passengers were whispering now. A woman in 1C had seen Rachel walk the boy back. A man in 2A mentioned he saw the captain speak to her. A couple across the aisle were already reading a comment thread about the incident on Reddit, and someone, somewhere, had posted Rachel's name. Flight attendant Rachel Adams removed a black child from first class without checking his ticket. The CEO's son. The boy had the right seat. Corporations are scrambling. Your accountability in airlines. The post had over 18,000 likes in less than an hour. In the airline's downtown headquarters, Danielle Franklin stood in her private conference room, arms folded, eyes locked on a projection screen where several internal monitors were tracking the situation. Her assistant, Andrea, stood nearby with a tablet. The videos hit 2.1 million views, Andrea said quietly. CNN is reaching out for comment. NPR too. Reddit threads are boiling. Danielle nodded, expression unreadable. Issue the preliminary statement. Acknowledge the incident. Pledge transparency. Do not offer a corporate apology yet. Understood. And Rachel Adams? Ground her the moment that plane lands. I want her escorted off the aircraft. Back on board, Rachel stood in the galley near the coffee machine, clutching a paper cup she no longer wanted. Kayla approached her slowly. I've never seen you do that before, Kayla said quietly. Rachel glanced up. Do what? Move a passenger without checking, especially a kid. Rachel didn't answer. Do you think maybe you made a mistake? For a moment, Rachel's mask cracked. I did what I thought was right. Kayla looked at her carefully. Or what you assumed was right. The paper cup in Rachel's hand trembled slightly. She didn't respond, because deep down she already knew. At the rear of the plane, two passengers were exchanging hushed remarks. That's the boy, right? The one from the video? Yeah, you think they'll fire her? Shouldn't be flying if you can't treat people fairly. CEO's son or not, it was wrong. Even in the economy where the aisles were narrower and legroom was tighter, the gravity of the moment hung in the air. People had noticed. People were talking. And that, more than anything, was what Rachel Adams feared the most. Up front, Noah finally received another message from his mother. Sit tight. We land in 43 minutes. I've got this. He smiled faintly. It wasn't a victorious smile. It wasn't even relief. It was something deeper, a quiet knowing. His mom was moving mountains from the ground while he held the line in the sky. He stared at the message a moment longer, then typed a response. Okay, I'm ready. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as Flight 217 began its slow descent toward the tarmac. The familiar chime of the seatbelt sign rang out, followed by the gentle murmur of final instructions. But for Rachel Adams, none of it sounded familiar anymore. She stood near the front of the aircraft, her hands clenched behind her back in a posture she had long ago mastered, poised, authoritative, untouchable. It had served her well for over 15 years. But today, it felt brittle. She could sense it. The change. The silence from her colleagues. The stares she had never noticed before. Even the passengers who used to meet her smile now avoided her eyes. What had once been routine now felt like theater. One final act before the curtain fell. In seat 1A, Noah Franklin glanced out the window as the airport came into view. Runways, hangars, terminal gates. He'd landed in this city dozens of times before, but never like this. Never with a plane full of people whispering behind him. Never with so many wondering who he was and what he had done. And certainly never with every flight attendant carefully pretending not to look at him. The new protocol for guilt. His phone vibrated again. Security will meet the plane. I'll be waiting. You're not alone. Mom. He read the message 3 times. Not alone. It didn't take the weight away, but it helped him breathe through it. At gate C12, a black sedan with government plates pulled up to a private entrance on the tarmac. Danielle Franklin stepped out, composed but burning. She wore a slate gray coat, heels polished to a mirror shine. Her hair was pulled back tightly. Her eyes, behind clear frames, were sharp with purpose. 2 airport security personnel greeted her with immediate recognition. Not because she'd announced herself, but because everyone now knew who she was. Inside, agents in black polos with Skylift insignias stood stationed near the jet bridge. They weren't just there to escort a passenger. They were there to make a statement. Meanwhile, the internet storm grew louder. A second video had been uploaded, this time from the rear cabin. It showed Rachel returning Noah to his seat in first class. The caption read, "Too little, too late. He deserved better from the start. Noah Franklin, shucks your Skylift accountable." Comments surged. She only walked him back because she got caught. Imagine doing that to any child, let alone the CEO's son. This isn't an apology, it's a power shift. Skylift's official Twitter account posted a statement at 3:14 p.m. "We are aware of a situation involving one of our crew members on Flight 217. An internal review is underway. We are committed to dignity, equality, and accountability." But the replies came hard and fast. "Too late. Commit to action, not slogans. Where's the flight attendant now? Where's the CEO? Where's the boy?" In the cockpit, Captain Carter took a slow breath and opened the comm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach into the city. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and tray tables secured. Flight attendants, prepare for landing." He turned toward Blake, his co-pilot. "Let's make this clean. You think it'll stop once we land?" "No," Carter said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The wheels touched down with a soft bounce, one of the smoother landings Captain Carter had made. But the real turbulence awaited them beyond the jet bridge. As the aircraft slowed to a crawl along the taxiway, Rachel stood stiffly behind the first-class curtain, barely blinking. She already knew what awaited her: a corporate escort, a formal suspension, a disciplinary review, a meeting she wouldn't control, and likely, a career-defining stain she'd never escape. But none of it hit as hard as the memory of that boy's face when she told him to stand up and leave. That still lingered, burned, and she couldn't look away from it anymore. When the aircraft came to a complete stop, the chime sounded again. Seatbelts clicked, bags were lifted, but this time first class did not exit first. Airport security entered the cabin quietly, with calm authority. They moved with intention, not aggressively, not theatrically, just firm. One officer approached Rachel with a clipboard. "Miss Adams, we've been instructed to escort you to the operations office for debriefing. Please come with us." She nodded once. No resistance. She looked over at Noah for a brief second, but he didn't look back. She didn't deserve that look. Not anymore. As Rachel walked the aisle, flanked by security, whispers rose like tidewater. Some passengers murmured under their breath. Others turned away. Kayla stood just behind the galley curtain, arms folded. She didn't move to speak. She simply nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that this wasn't over. Not really. And for the first time, Rachel didn't hide her trembling hands. Outside the gate, Danielle Franklin waited, poised, silent. She didn't pace. She didn't fume. She simply stood, like a storm's calm center, while the doors opened. And when her son stepped off the jet bridge, eyes scanning the space, she stepped forward, arms open, not for drama, but for completion. Noah walked straight into her embrace. No tears, no collapse, just presence, just clarity. Rachel passed them seconds later, flanked by 2 security personnel, head down. She didn't dare glance Danielle's way, and she didn't need to. Danielle saw her weakness, saw her silence, and saw in that moment that power wasn't loud. It was watchful. The door to the Skylift corporate conference room clicked shut with a sound that echoed louder than it should have. Inside, the temperature was perfectly regulated, the walls lined with soundproofing, and the long glass table gleamed under recessed lighting. But the air was heavy. Rachel Adams sat at the far end, her uniform replaced with a gray sweater and navy slacks. She looked smaller now, paler. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her shoulders, once squared with confidence, sloped forward as if pulled by invisible chains. Across from her sat Ethan Raymond, the airline's chief operating officer. He held a tablet, its screen displaying an internal report, a video, and a draft statement from PR. And beside him, seated with quiet composure and a spine of steel, was Danielle Franklin. Not as a mother, as the CEO. Danielle didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her silence was not absence. It was calculation. She was letting the weight settle, letting Rachel squirm beneath the enormity of what she had done. "Miss Adams," Ethan began, voice calm but clipped, "we've conducted a rapid internal audit of the incident aboard Flight 217. Based on video evidence, crew testimony, and your acknowledgement, it's clear that a passenger, Noah Franklin, was removed from his assigned seat in first class without cause or verification." Rachel nodded, her voice a whisper. "Yes." Danielle's eyes never left her. "You bypassed protocol," Ethan continued. "You acted on an assumption, and you did so in a way that visibly humiliated a 10-year-old child in front of an entire cabin." Rachel swallowed. "It was a mistake," she murmured. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Danielle's voice cut in, sharp and controlled. "Was it policy, Miss Adams, to remove children from first class based solely on instinct?" Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came. Danielle leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here because he's my son. I'm here because he represents every passenger who's ever been judged first and asked second." Later that afternoon, Skylift International released an official statement. "We acknowledge the unacceptable incident involving one of our senior flight attendants and a minor passenger aboard Flight 217. Discrimination of any kind has no place in our cabins. As of today, we are placing Rachel Adams on indefinite suspension, pending mandatory anti-bias retraining and further review." But that wasn't enough, not for the public, and certainly not for Noah. Back at home, Noah sat on the edge of his bed, the sunlight casting soft lines through the blinds across his comforter. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of a clock down the hall. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from classmates, articles forwarded by friends, videos he couldn't bring himself to open. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. But he hadn't spoken yet. Not really. His mother had fought the battle for him. She had held the line, stared down the system, and made it listen. But deep inside, something stirred, a quiet awareness that his story had become something bigger than himself. He tapped on the camera app, stared at the screen for a long time, then hit record. "Hi, I'm Noah. I'm 10 years old. You've probably heard what happened to me on the plane, but I don't want to talk about what was done to me. I want to talk about what we should do next." His voice was steady, measured, not angry, but not afraid either. "I know there are other kids like me, black kids, brown kids, who get looked at a certain way just for being where they're supposed to be. Who gets asked questions that other kids don't? Who gets moved, judged, watched, and silenced? I don't think we need more apologies. I think we need more people watching. And I think we need to remember, you don't have to shout to speak up. Sometimes just being there is enough." He ended the video quietly. Then he uploaded it. Within hours, Unlike Noah Was Here began trending globally. Not because of outrage, because of clarity. It wasn't just the fact that he was the son of a CEO. It was that he had carried himself through the humiliation, the silence, the reinstatement. Not as a symbol of power, but as a mirror. A mirror held up to a system that still assumed worth based on appearances. At Skylift headquarters, Danielle stood in front of a large digital screen in the strategy war room. A dozen PR, HR, and executive staff gathered around her. The tweet with Noah's video played silently in the background. She turned to them, speaking not as a mother now, but as a leader with a fire behind her, calm. "We will no longer tolerate performative training. We're going to implement something real, mandatory, recurring, and tied to evaluation. I want a task force built by next Friday. Include former passengers, include behavioral experts, include voices like Kayla Monroe's." She paused, then added, "And I want to call it something that means something. The Noah Protocol." Elsewhere, Rachel Adams sat alone in a small apartment, lit by the bluish glare of her phone screen. The suspension letter had arrived in her inbox just an hour before. She reread it 4 times. She told herself it was unfair, that she didn't mean harm, that it had been blown out of proportion, but deep down, beneath the defenses, she knew. This wasn't a mistake of policy. It was a mistake of character. And now the silence she had once weaponized had turned on her. The morning after Skylift's official statement was released, Danielle Franklin sat in her corner office, sipping black coffee and reading the overnight press cycle. The storm hadn't passed. It had merely changed shape. But just as she began planning next steps, an unexpected email appeared. From maya.ellington.crewprotonmail.com. Subject, it wasn't just your son. Danielle's eyes narrowed as she clicked. My name is Maya Ellington. I was a flight attendant with Skylift from 2016 to 2021. Rachel Adams was my lead for over 3 years. What she did to your son, Noah, isn't new. She's done it before. To passengers, to crew, to me. Danielle's pulse slowed. Attached were 2 audio recordings, a video clip, and a typed statement that began like a wound reopening. I stayed quiet when she forced a Haitian family off a flight in 2018. I stayed quiet when she accused a Muslim father of looking suspicious and had his seat changed. And I stayed quiet when she told me, flat out, people like us don't belong in first class unless they're working it. Danielle scrolled through the evidence, each item a stone cracking the dam. This wasn't about one incident. This was a pattern, and it had gone unseen because no one in power had cared to look, until now. Later that day, Maya Ellington arrived at Skylift headquarters. She wore a soft gray blouse and flat shoes, her natural curls pinned back neatly. Her face was calm, but beneath it, her eyes held a quiet fire. Danielle met her personally in the 14th floor boardroom. You could have sent this to the press, Danielle said. Why come to me? Because now, Maya replied, someone up there is finally listening. They sat down across from each other. No staff, no lawyers, just truth in its rawest form. I wasn't trying to burn the system down, Maya said. I just wanted to fly with dignity. But Rachel, she policed that dignity. Danielle nodded slowly. Would you be willing to say all this publicly? Maya looked directly at her. I've been ready for 4 years. I just needed someone who wouldn't look away. 3 days later, Time magazine published a special feature. Beyond the seat, a former flight attendant breaks her silence. It included Maya's story, the audio clips, the 2019 video, and one devastating quote. Noah Franklin gave us a moment. Let's not waste it. Let's turn it into a movement. The article went viral within hours. And for Danielle, it was no longer just about protocol or retraining. It was about transformation. That same afternoon, she called a company-wide meeting. This time, she invited not only executives, but crew members, union reps, and even a group of passengers who had filed past complaints. Standing at the front of the auditorium, she didn't speak from a podium. She didn't need a stage. She simply stood, hands open at her sides, and said, we built our brand on excellence, but if our standard of excellence excludes dignity, it isn't excellence, it's elitism. She paused. We will launch an independent review board. We will revise every disciplinary policy tied to passenger complaints. And we will establish a protected whistleblower network, because what happened to Maya should never happen again. Then she turned to the screen behind her and unveiled the new directive. The Noah Protocol Equity in the Air starts with honesty on the ground. At home, Noah scrolled through the Time article. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. His name was now a symbol, but it wasn't for fame, it was for accountability. A new message came through from an unknown number. Thank you, Noah. I saw what happened. My son is 6. You gave me courage. A mother in Detroit. Noah reread it twice. Then he opened his notes app. This isn't just my story anymore. This is everyone who's been told they don't belong. And the difference now is we're not leaving quietly. In a quiet apartment in Queens, Rachel Adams scrolled through the timepiece. Her name wasn't mentioned. But the quotes, the recordings, the stories, they didn't need to name her. Everyone already knew. She read Maya's quote again and again. She policed dignity. Rachel closed the screen, her hand trembling. For the first time in her life, she didn't know how to defend herself. And for the first time, she wondered if defending herself was the problem all along. The stage was lit in soft blue. 3 chairs, 1 long table. No backdrops, no branding, no corporate banners, just the words projected on the wall behind them. Flying fair, restoring dignity in the skies. A national town hall hosted by Skylift International. It was the first public forum of its kind. streamed live on major networks, social media platforms, and rebroadcast in airports around the world. What began as a scandal had now become a movement. At the center of it all sat three people. Danielle Franklin, CEO of Skylift, was calm and unreadable. Maya Ellington, former flight attendant, her posture strong, her voice clear, and Noah Franklin, 10 years old, sitting beside his mother, not as a prop but as a person. He wore a navy blazer, a crisp white shirt, and an expression that had aged slightly since Flight 217. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. The moderator's voice echoed softly. Ms. Franklin, I want to begin with you. You've issued statements. You've suspended the crew member involved. You've launched what's now being called the NOAA Protocol. But today's question is bigger. Do you believe this was an isolated incident? Danielle didn't hesitate. No, she said. It wasn't isolated. It was institutional. And the institution was mine. Gas rippled through the crowd. But she continued steady. People trusted our brand. But the truth is, we had no system to stop prejudice in real time. And we only changed when it affected someone with power. That's not justice. That's a delay. Next, the moderator turned to Maya. Maya, you've spoken out publicly for the first time after years of silence. Why now? Maya leaned in. Because for years we were told that speaking up meant being disloyal. But loyalty without truth is just complicity. Rachel Adams wasn't just one person. She was a reflection of a culture that protected assumptions over evidence. I stayed quiet because I thought no one would listen. But when Noah spoke, he reminded the world that silence isn't safety. It's surrender. A murmur of applause moved through the audience. Not loud, not performative, just real. Then finally the spotlight turned to Noah. The moderator crouched to his level, microphone in hand. Noah, you've shown more grace than many adults through all of this. Is there something you'd like to say to the people watching at home? Noah glanced at the camera. Then he spoke, not like a child coach, but like someone who had lived what most were just beginning to understand. A lot of people say it was brave when I stayed quiet on the plane. But I wasn't being brave. I was being small, because I thought small was safe. He looked around, then added, but I'm not small anymore, and no one should have to shrink to fit into someone else's idea of where they belong. This time the applause came faster, fuller. People didn't clap because he was young. They clapped because he was right. Backstage, Rachel Adams watched from the green room, invited by Skylift's legal team to attend in silence. Her appearance hadn't been announced, but Danielle had insisted she be present, not to perform, to witness. Rachel sat rigid in her chair, fingers twisting in her lap. On screen, the boy she had humiliated was now shaping national policy. The woman she once dismissed as too emotional was rewriting corporate governance. And her name, though not spoken aloud yet, was hanging in the air like smoke. Suddenly Danielle spoke again, this time to the crowd and the cameras alike. There's one more voice that hasn't been heard. And today she has the choice to remain silent or to finally be accountable. Danielle looked directly into the side wing. Rachel Adams is here. The room went still. Rachel stood. She walked toward the stage as if each step were a sentence in a confession. No music, no announcement, just her presence. She took the empty chair and waited. The moderator broke the silence. Ms. Adams, this is your moment. You are not required to speak, but if you choose to, what would you like to say? Rachel cleared her throat. Her voice, once commanding in first class, now wavered. I made a decision that hurt someone, and I justified it with procedure, with instinct, with what I thought was safety. But the truth is, I was protecting my bias, not anyone else's comfort. She turned toward Noah. You didn't deserve what I did to you, and I'm sorry, not because I was caught, but because I was wrong. Noah looked at her, not with hatred, but with a maturity that unsettled her more than any reprimand ever had. He said nothing, and that silence carried more weight than words ever could. Later that evening, social media exploded, not with outrage, but with conversation. Clips from the forum were shared under the hashtag #BelongingTakesFlight. A new narrative began to emerge, not just about blame, but about healing. And through it all, Noah remained quiet. Not retreating, just listening. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give others the space to learn what you already knew. The training room wasn't grand. No cameras, no podiums, no air of corporate theater. Just 12 chairs in a circle, a whiteboard with a handwritten quote at the top. If we are not actively dismantling bias, we are reinforcing it. Rachel Adams sat in the third chair to the left, hands folded tightly in her lap. The silence wasn't forced. It was chosen by the room, by the facilitator, by the weight of her presence. Her name was known now, not for excellence, but for error. And now, for the first time in her 20 years of aviation, she wasn't leading anything. She was learning, or trying to. The woman at the front of the room, Dr. Simone Trailer, didn't raise her voice. She didn't shame. She simply wrote on the board with calm precision. What assumption did you act on? Who paid the price for it? Would you have acted differently if they looked like you? She turned slowly and gestured toward Rachel. Miss Adams, would you like to begin? Rachel hesitated. Then low voice she answered. I acted on a feeling. I didn't stop to question it. Because I thought my experience permitted me not to. Dr. Trailer nodded. And what did that assumption cost someone else? Rachel's eyes flicked to the floor. Everything. Elsewhere in the city, Danielle Franklin stood before the press at Skylift headquarters, flanked by members of the new independent oversight panel. Behind her, 5 banners lined the wall, each marked with a pillar of the airline's new operational doctrine: bias, response, passenger dignity, crew, equity, transparent, oversight, whistleblower protection. She spoke with a calm that came not from comfort, but from clarity. Today, we announced the launch of the Flight Forward program, a 36-month reform strategy built with passenger voices, frontline workers, and independent monitors. She paused. But let me be clear. This isn't charity. It's overdue accountability. And every airline that says they're watching, know this. We're not changing to look good. We're changing because silence has cost too much. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some nodded. One whispered, she just changed the standard. Meanwhile, at home, Noah stood in front of a mirror practicing. Hello, I'm Noah Franklin. I'm 10. I like basketball, documentaries, and fruit snacks. And I've been called a symbol. He frowned, then shook his head. No, that's not how I want to start. He tried again. Hi, I'm Noah. And I'd like to talk about how being quiet doesn't mean you're okay, and how being polite doesn't mean you're safe. He looked at his reflection, still uncertain, but growing. That night, Noah sat at the kitchen table while Danielle reviewed a final draft on her laptop. Mom, he asked, if people still think I only got my seat back because you're the CEO, does that make it less real? She looked up, measured her words. No, she said, it makes it more necessary. She leaned closer. Because if your last name didn't matter, we wouldn't be in this fight. But the point, Noah, is to make sure that next time, no one's name has to matter at all. Noah nodded slowly. That made sense. And it hurt because it was true. In another part of the city, Rachel Adams sat in front of a blank Word document. The airline had given her a choice. Submit a public acknowledgement letter, handwritten or typed. Refuse and forfeit any chance of ever flying commercially again under Skylift's authority. Rachel had agreed, but now the cursor blinked like judgment. She began typing. To Noah Franklin, and to every passenger I've ever made feel small. I cannot erase what I did, but I can name it. And I can choose to face it instead of hiding behind policy or pride. She paused, breathed, then continued. I failed to recognize you. I failed to see past a story I made up in my mind. And for that, I am deeply sorry. This isn't redemption. This is a beginning. I will carry your silence, your composure, your dignity with me from this day forward. Because you taught me something I should have already known. The first rule of flying is not service, it's respect. Sincerely, Rachel Adams. She hit save, but she didn't feel lighter, only honest, for the first time in years. 2 days later, the letter was released publicly as part of Skylift's new internal learning archive. Some praised it, some said it was too late, but for Noah, when he read it, all he said was, She finally used my name. That week, Noah and Danielle traveled to Washington, D.C., where he was invited to appear on 60 Minutes. Before the cameras rolled, the producer asked him, "Anything off limits?" Noah thought for a second, then shook his head. "No, just let me speak like me." Across the country, other airlines began holding emergency meetings. Gate agents were briefed again. Crew evaluation protocols were revised. Passenger review panels were suddenly being formed because Skylift had moved first, and now the silence around prejudice in the air was breaking open. At home that evening, Noah sat by the window. He watched planes lifting into the sky, their wings catching the fading light. Each one looked the same from the outside, but he knew better now. What mattered was who got to sit where they belonged, and whether anyone dared to defend that. The studio lights were warm, not blinding, just steady, like a held breath. Noah Franklin sat across from journalist Clara Temple, whose calm presence had graced American television for 2 decades. The 60 Minutes interview was live in under 10 minutes, but the air already crackled with anticipation. Clara smiled gently, leaning forward. "You nervous, Noah?" He thought for a second, then shrugged. "A little, but I think I've already said the hard part." Clara nodded. "Then let's help the world hear it." The producer counted them down. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. "Good evening, I'm Clara Temple. Tonight we speak with the 10-year-old boy whose quiet courage changed the way a nation sees the skies. Please welcome Noah Franklin." The camera cut to Noah. He didn't flinch. Clara asked the first question. "Noah, what do you want people to understand about what happened to you?" He paused and then spoke. "I think people see a story about a kid getting kicked out of a seat, but it's not really about the seat. It's about who people think belongs in one, and what happens when you don't look like what they expect." Clara nodded. "And what do you think should happen now?" Noah didn't hesitate. "I think the rules should change, not just on paper, but in hearts. You can teach policies, but you have to unlearn fear." There it was. Not a rehearsed line, not a viral soundbite, just the truth, and America leaned in. Back at Skylift headquarters, Danielle Franklin watched the broadcast from a quiet executive lounge. Her hand rested on a folded blueprint on her lap, a rendering of the new first-class cabin redesigned for Skylift Flight 001. The interior looked the same from afar: leather seats, brushed aluminum, and ambient lighting. But there was one distinct difference. Each seat now carried a small silver plaque, elegantly engraved with a single sentence: "Respect is not assigned by status. It is owed to every soul on board." The program was called See Me, Seat Me, and it would roll out across every Skylift aircraft over the next 2 years. 1 month later, at JFK International Airport, Skylift hosted a private but widely streamed ceremony on the tarmac. A newly christened aircraft gleamed under the spring sunlight: Flight 217, the restoration flight. Danielle stood before a modest crowd: press, airline executives, union leaders, former passengers, and most importantly, crew members in uniform, watching in silence. She spoke not with grandeur, but with grace. "We cannot undo what was done, but we can refuse to pretend it never happened. This aircraft is not just a machine, it is a message. That when we say every passenger matters, we mean it." She turned toward Noah, standing beside her in a tailored Navy suit, his face solemn. "Noah," she said softly, "it's time." He stepped forward, took a small white cloth, and gently pulled it away from the aircraft's forward fuselage. Beneath was a simple emblem: Flight 217, the seat that changed everything, in honor of Noah Franklin. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood in reverent silence. Because this wasn't a celebration, it was a correction. Elsewhere, Rachel Adams sat in a small community room, surrounded by newer recruits, young, hopeful, wide-eyed. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't in charge. She was a guest speaker for the very training course that once judged her actions. Her voice cracked only once as she said, "Don't ever let your instincts speak louder than a person's dignity. I did, and someone paid for it. And now I show up to make sure no one else does." And for the first time in her life, Someone applauded her for honesty, not authority. That evening, Noah sat on the rooftop of their building beside his mother. Below, the city pulsed like a slow heartbeat, alive, full of stories. Danielle handed him a gift box. Inside was a first-class ticket for an upcoming Skylift flight. But this time, it wasn't ceremonial. It was practical. And the name on it wasn't just his. It was engraved, Noah Franklin, passenger, advocate, legacy. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. She smiled. I'm stepping back soon, kiddo. Are you ready to fly higher than me? Noah laughed. I already am. The final shot wasn't dramatic, just a quiet moment. A boy is sitting in his rightful seat, a plane ascending into the clouds, and a voice, steady, hopeful, full of tomorrow, saying, if dignity flies with us, then maybe we all finally land somewhere better. Final message. This wasn't just a story about a seat. It was about who gets seen, who gets heard, and what happens when one voice breaks the silence. Let this be a reminder. Every child carries a story, and some stories change the air we all breathe.